Hello, everyone. Welcome to Moonday Lives with WYLD. My name is WYLD of WYLD Fempire, and just tuning in here with you, putting on some lovely essential oils. Yes, allowing myself to come into this space with you today. Thank you so much for joining. Really appreciate you. And what I am showing up here this moon day to speak about, to share, is where I am curious. I am really, really curious today and this week about the concept of perfectionism and how that shows up in our lives and how we have all been we've all been encouraged to normalize this idea of perfectionism in our lives. And I'm so curious about that. I'm so curious about why. Why would a culture desire to have its people feel less confident in themselves? Why would a culture desire to create generations of humans who are so obsessed with doing things right or showing up perfectly or at least being able to put on that false face of perfectionism in order to feel as though we are successful or we're showing up in life and we're doing the thing. Hi, Allie. So good to see you here. I've missed your face as well. And hello, Mary. Hello, Alice. Nice to see you. Yeah, this has been coming up a lot for me. So if you caught this live last week, I mentioned that I've been healing from COVID for going on 5 weeks now. And I spoke about it a couple of moon days ago, just in humbleness, in humility, in vulnerability. And I made a post about it, a reel about it, and immediately lost 24 followers in like the course of an hour and a half. And it's really triggered a lot of curiosities in me of moving through the, oh, am I disappointing people? Moving through the idea that I did something wrong by being a human, moving through the queries in my mind of how can I show up better? Is it incorrect for me as a healer to share my own healing process? Just all of the mind fuckery that happens when things that we don't prefer go on. And so this is the curiosity that I have going on in my own heart and head right now, is my own personal addiction to perfectionism and really learning how to root down and ferret out the ways in which I too have been domesticated in this culture. And I am continuing to operate from that toxic foundation of needing to do it just right or show up perfectly or show up in a way that is more easily received. And so this is where my curiosity lives today. I would love to hear in the chat what comes up for you when you consider perfectionism. I know for myself, as I have been in this healing space, which has been so, so profoundly humbling when our bodies don't work the way we would prefer them to work, when our minds don't operate as quickly as they once did, right? These little glimpses and tastes of what potentially might be my elderhood, right? When we all get into our 80s and 90s, and if we're blessed into our hundreds, shit just doesn't work the same way. And we kind of go around pretending that maybe that'll never happen to us, but we never really know, right? And so being with this illness the last 5 weeks and being in that humble place and seeing the demons of perfectionism start to rise in my mind has been really, really fascinating. Can I show up to these lives each week, which I have for at least 15 minutes, but can I show up not looking my best? Can I show up not putting on my makeup? Can I show up really energetically feeling inward and dull and still show up to a commitment that I made for myself and for my people to do these lives for every Moonday for this year for at least 15 minutes? It's so fascinating what has arisen within me in keeping this commitment while not being able to do so in the ways that I might prefer. So here is this juxtaposition between preference and perfection, right? We might prefer showing up exactly right with our hair coiffed and our red lipstick and all of the things, and that's fine. It's so fun to show up in the way that we want to show up. But what happens in the in between times? Right? Like, who are we in the times in between those peak moments in our lives? Because we're all human. We're all messy humans. Life moves in an energetic wave and is always push pulling us between this spectrum of experiences. And we will get sick. We will be unwell. We will lose people. Our pets will die. We might lose our jobs. Things will occur that we don't prefer. And yet, can we still continue to show up in our lives in integrity, even if we don't show up in that perfect way? This has been what has been sitting with me in these last few weeks as I've been quite unwell. And what is arriving, I'm having all of these memories of being a teenager in the Bible Belt, particularly here in the United States. I was raised in Kentucky. And when I review those formative years in my life, it is obnoxious how many hours I spent looking in the mirror, like plucking eyebrows, applying things, trying to place a face out into the world that would be accepted or loved or received in the ways that I thought I should be as a woman. And as I look back on those and I feel those come back up and arrive at this point in my late 40s, I find it very fascinating. And I have a lot of curiosity there around how woven into our mental constructs this idea of perfectionism is. And what does it take for each one of us individually to rewrite the story, to unplug from the perfectionism mentality, and to begin to arrive into our lives in this solid foundational space where it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if we are showing up in a way that someone else will perceive us or receive us. We actually are showing up in our lives day after day after day based solely on our experience from the inside out. And coming to terms with and coming to peace with the fact that that experience may or may not be perfect. It may or may not be what we prefer. It might be a dumpster fire. It might be a pinnacle point in our lives. It might be some gray bored space in between of those two ends of the spectrum. But either way, we make a commitment in our hearts to continue to show up in our lives and be our authentic, whole selves, regardless of how we might be perceived from the outside, right? Where we are beginning to make our choices specifically because they are nourishing for ourselves. And that nourishment comes from the inside out. And we are expressing ourselves authentically from that space. So, a silly story that came to me this morning. I'm growing my bangs out. I'm doing weird fun stuff with my hair. And as I was applying moisturizer this morning on my face, I realized, oh, I've got a lot more wrinkles going on my forehead than I do anywhere else. And I realized the reason I have that is because for the last 20 years, I've been diligent about caring for the skin that other people can see. But because I've always had bangs, I never bothered to care for that part of my face because no one else could see it. And I know that's a really silly story, but it kind of encapsulates this idea that I'm bringing to the table today, this idea of perfectionism, this idea that we are doing these things for an external reason, for the ways in which other people might see, perceive, and receive us, rather than what is just nourishing and delicious for ourselves, right? Like in my earlier version, in my version prior to my own healing process and coming to acknowledgement of the toxicity that I was carrying within myself. If I was truly doing things just for the care of my own body, I would have done so. It wouldn't have had this mental blockage or veil that it was just the parts that other people can see. Right. So I'm curious how that lands for you. Let's see. Allie says, totally resonates. It's a constant lesson being honest with myself, whether I'm acting from the need to be perfect, motivated by guilt, shame, self punishment, versus truly wanting to better myself from a place of love. Self love versus self sabotage through perfectionism and overindulgence. Yes, Allie, you nailed it there. That is part of the journey, right? Is getting comfortable with self intimacy and that self inquiry and being willing to question. Just like that silly story that I just shared, even though it's silly, there is a piece of me that feels I feel a little agitation, a little embarrassment, a little like, oh, I can't believe I'm saying this out loud, but fuck it. Like that's part of the medicine. That's part of the antidote is learning how to just call ourselves out for being messy humans. And if the last 5 weeks of being really ill has taught me anything, it is to create more distance and to step further away from caring what other people might think of my messy human experience. This is a vast piece of truly becoming embodied, truly allowing more of our higher self to embody, to come in to the body and to express outward through our little animal body, is to allow that acknowledgement and expression and release of the ways in which we may have betrayed ourselves in this process. And to recognize that it's not good or bad or right or wrong. Like we've all been raised in this civilized Western culture. We've all been raised with this thread of perfectionism running through us. It's been gifted to us from our culture. And if we truly began to investigate the why, if we truly began to investigate, it becomes really apparent that when individual people are so distracted and obsessed with how others are viewing them, then we don't have a lot of bandwidth and we don't have a lot of mental and emotional space to actually do self inquiry, to be present in our lives and present with our patterns and actually choosing to perhaps behave differently or behave outside of the box, right? If we are so actively invested in putting that face, I call it, I call that old version of myself my Martha Stewart phase, right? Like I was the perfect wife, perfect mother, house was perfect, but it wasn't. It was this false front that I put up. And if you had opened any drawer or closet, you would have seen the chaos that was actually happening in my mind when I was in a life that I was not truly happy in. That version of myself, that Martha Stewart version of myself, couldn't let people come over if the house wasn't perfectly dialed in. It's it's not a great version of myself. I don't prefer that version of myself, but I share her with you today because I think it's important that we start to acknowledge that we can change, that we go through phases, that we can't be perfect, but that maybe we had a phase in our life where we tried really hard to be perfect, where we tried really hard to fit into someone else's idea of what a good woman or a good wife or a good partner or a good mother looks and feels like. Because if we don't acknowledge that first for ourselves, then we don't have the space to make a different choice. So I'm acknowledging out loud, yeah, I went through a Martha Stewart phase in my marriage, my previous marriage, which I have now been divorced going on 11 years, single parent most of my children's lives. And in that first space of my marriage, I was addicted to perfectionism. I wanted so badly for my husband, my ex husband, and his community, and the community we lived in to really see me as the best wife and mother. And it was so dishonest and not true. That wasn't where my heart was. That wasn't really where my soul wanted to take me. And yet, when I found myself pregnant at 23 and then got married within 6 months and uh, began this journey that I hadn't fully planned for myself at that point in my life, it was amazing how quickly the patterns that had been installed, the programs that had been installed, clicked in, right? Like prior to getting pregnant, I was on a wild child path. I really had this desire to travel. I wanted to create art. I wanted to do what I'm doing now, reading tarot cards, being magic, being my whole authentic self. And then when I got pregnant and reality became a little more in need of responsibility, I found my brain shift into a pattern that I didn't even recognize was in here. I immediately began to value myself based on my productivity, my ability to keep a house, my ability to mother, my ability to be a wife, all of these things. And those are all beautiful things, right? Like there's nothing wrong with those things. But in that process, I lost connection to this version of myself that I had been tending for the 2 decades prior. And it took me almost a decade to reclaim her and come back into my own knowing of who I am, and to unplug from that program of perfectionism. So, this is where my curiosity is this week. I would love to know what this is bringing up for you. There is so much nuance around what it means in this day and age to be a human, to be a woman, to be a parent, to be an employee, to be a witch. Like there, we have the opportunity right now to have this amazing front row seat at the evolution of a culture as our empire is moving through its slow demise, right? Like, we have enough historical information to recognize that empire doesn't live forever. Everything changes, everything lives, it grows, and then it dies. And that is true for the culture that we find ourselves in. And all of us who are alive today have this amazing front row seat. We are watching history happen in real time. And we are connected enough through the internet and through one another and technology to be tracking it in real time, moment to moment. It's fascinating and curious and amazing and overwhelming and all of the things. And one of the things that is coming up for all of us is this idea of perfectionism and having to do things the way that we thought they were supposed to be done. After 2 years and some change of a pandemic, and seeing that things can actually shift pretty quickly, that we can redefine what work means for us, that we can redefine what relationships mean in our families, that we can actively change the trajectory of our lives pretty fast if we choose to do it. And that means that we too can uproot this tendril of perfectionism that lives in all of us if we choose to. And the first step is simply acknowledging that we carry it, that it's been passed down to us through our lineage, through our culture, and that it is an ever evolving process. So there's no shame, there's no judgment. You can't do it right or wrong. It is an exploration of self intimacy. So, the invitation this week for each of us is to really tune in to our internal self talk, tune in as we are going through our days, and try to take notice. Try to take notice of the times that you might catch yourself operating in just rote pattern, where you're not actively choosing what you're doing, but you're just doing the pattern, doing what you're supposed to do when you're supposed to do it. And see how many times you can catch yourself and ask, is this what I want to be doing right now? Am I doing this because I want to, or because I feel obligated to do so? Am I choosing to do this? Am I choosing? Am I present in my life in this now moment? And just see what comes up for you. And if you notice that you are operating more out of obligation, that is a beautiful opportunity to dive in and see if you are potentially operating from this thread of perfectionism, from this place of giving more of a fuck of what other people think about you than what you truly long for and desire to be doing with your time. Let it be fun. Let it be a fun exploration. Let it be a fun opportunity to get to know yourself a little bit better and to make choices that feel in right alignment with you. Yeah. This feels like the transmission for us this week. Thank you so much for tuning in. I hope that it serves you well, and I hope that you have everything that you need. And the emotional and energetic reading for the week, the Moonday message, will be coming out here very soon. So please hop on back to my channel and take a look out for that when you have a moment later today. It'll be coming out soon. And if you are enjoying these lives, please make sure to like, please make sure to follow, and take good care of yourselves. I will see you next week. Thank you so much, Allie. It's been so good chatting with you. I'm going to read through these comments and I will respond soon. Bye for now.